Hello, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. I teach at the University of Colorado Boulder, previously at UC Berkeley and UCLA. Recently, I've done a series in which I read through the poem Hauksbók in Old Norse, commenting on each stanza as I went and explaining what the Old Norse says. This is a fairly simple thing, or simple procedure with Hauksbók, because there's only one manuscript that contains that poem, the Codex Regius. The next poem that I want to give that treatment is the other of the two most important poems and the two first poems in that manuscript, the Codex Regius, which makes up the bulk of what we call the Poetic Edda. That is the poem Våluspá. But this is not quite as simple a procedure because Våluspá is attested not only in the Codex Regius but also in a manuscript called Hauksbók, which is a little bit later. Not a little bit later, it's about 100 years later. And Hauksbók contains some stanzas that are not in the Codex Regius, and vice versa. And some of the readings are a little bit different. Additionally, Snorri Sturluson in the Prose Edda quotes much more of Våluspá than he ever does of Hauksbók. And so there are some alternate readings that come in from Snorri. What I'm going to do with this series is read through the Codex Regius version. That is what I translate from in my own translation of the Poetic Edda. And then what I might do is afterwards take a look in a different video at the Hauksbók Våluspá, at least the stanzas that are different or additional relative to the Codex Regius. As usual, I will be reading in reconstructed Old Norse pronunciation, and I will be attempting to explain the Old Norse rather than to present a published, polished translation, such as you can find in my published translation of the Poetic Edda. At every 9th stanza, I will stop to make sure that I am explaining every single word in that stanza. And I'll do that also with the very first stanza. So, first stanza of Våluspá in the Codex Regius. Hljóðs bíð ek allar kindir, meri og minni mogu heimdalar. Vildu at ek valfóður, vel fyrtelja fornspjól fyrra, thou fremst man. A hearing, ask I, all families, greater and lesser, sons of Heimdall. You want that I, slaughtered father, well before tell old stories of men, those which earliest filler word remember. So I ask for a hearing, hljóðs. That is in the genitive because you ask for something in the genitive. So I ask for a hearing from all families, all kinds, the greater and lesser children of Heimdall. So in the poem Ríksula, Heimdall are fathers, the higher and lower classes of human beings. That's probably what this refers to. You want, father of the slaughtered is Valfóður, that's Odin, that I tell well old stories, those which I remember earliest. And then fyrra men, that could be a genitive, old stories about men, or it could perhaps be an accusative, tell before men. But I don't think that's as likely. Stanza 2. Ek man jotna or borna, þó forðu mig huda hofðu. Níu manna keima, níu yfirðjór, mjótt við meran, fjörmold neðan. I remember giants, or jotnar, born early, those who before me had been born. I remember 9 worlds or realms, 9 giant women or troll women. The famous fate tree, mjótt below fyr neðan, the earth. So she remembers these early giants born before her. And the Prose Edda, when we read Snorri's version of the story of creation, the first beings are giants. She remembers 9 worlds, a classic feature of Norse mythology, as well as these 9 troll women, unknown who exactly they are supposed to be. And no doubt the famous fate tree that's still below the earth, still a seed, is the great world tree, Yggdrasil. Stanza 3. Or var alda, þar umir byggði, Varasander Nesar, Nesvalarunir, Jorðfanskava ne uphimen, Gap Varginunga, and Gras Huergi. It was in early ages when Ymir dwelled. There was no sand, no sea, nor cool waves. The earth could not be found, did not exist, nor the heaven above. There was Ginnungagap, but no grass. Now, Ginnungagap is the great void at the beginning before the creation of the worlds. Gap means gap, like in English. The Ginnunga part has been explained as yawning, but also possibly as powerful. So either the yawning gap or the powerful gap, the void at the beginning. And then Ymir, these early ages when Ymir dwelled, Ymir is the first living thing, according to Snorri's account of creation in the Prose Edda. Stanza 4. Other borsunir bjóðum uppðu, þeir Midgard meran skopu. Solskein sunnan og salarsteina, þó var grund gróin, grunum Loki. Before the sons of Bur, that's Odin and his brothers Vili and Ve, lifted up the lands, Ipthu Bjóðum, and you lift Ippa something in the dative, that's why Bjóðum is dative plural there. Those ones, the sons of Bur, Odin and his brothers, who shaped the great or famous Midgard. The sun shone from the south on stones of a hall. Then the ground was grown with a green leek or onion, that kind of leek. Midgardr, of course, is the realm where humans live, the middle enclosure. Stanza 5. Sol varp sunnan sinni mona, hendi inni hygri himmen dur. Sol that ne vissi hvar hon sali oti, stjörnur that ne vissu hvar þær staði otu, moni that ne vissi what han megans oti. The sun threw from the south, the companion of the moon, with the right hand by the heaven horses. The sun did not know where she had halls, Sali. Stars did not know where they had places, Stadi. The moon did not know what kind of strength, what megans he had. Some things that deserve some comment here. The Himmen Yodir, that's been explained various different ways based on different readings and different manuscripts. I still think that it's just the straightforward thing that it says right there. The heaven, Himmen, Yo, which is horse, deer, animal. Very often in Old Norse you see animals called by the animal name and then deer. So like you see Bjarn, deer, bear animal just means bear. And since Snorri says in the Prose Edda when he's explaining some of these stanzas that the sun and the moon are pulled by horses, then it makes sense to think of that in this stanza. Stanza 6. Thó gengu regin ól og rokstóla, gin heil og góð, og that gatusk, nótt og niðjum, novn gófu. Morgin hetu og miðjan dag, undorn og aftan, orum atelja. Then all the gods went on their reason stools or event stools, those powerful holy gods, Gin Helog God. And they paid attention with each other. So the SK is the reflexive suffix. Gata is to take care of, pay attention to. With a reflexive suffix SK, it can often mean to discuss with one another. So they discussed with one another, Gatusk, about that, Mthat. They gave names, Noven, to night and to the phases of the moon. And they named the morning, Hetu Morgen, and the middle day, Midjan Dag. They named the Undorn is like the mid-afternoon time period, and the evening, Aptan, in order to tell Atelia the years. So the gods arranged the heavens in order to have a way of telling time. Stanza 7. Hittusk Asir o Idaveli, Ther Horg ok Hov, Ho Timbrudu, Avla Logdu, Auð Smíðudu, Tangir Skopu, ok Tol Gordu. The Asir met each other, reflexive SK, on Idavólr. They, the gods, who high-timbered, built with high timbers, altar and temple, Horg ok Hov. They made Avel, that's the fireplace and the smithy. They made wealth, Smíðudu Auð. They made tongs, Tangir, and they made tools, Tol. Stanza 8. Teveldu I Tuni, Tetir Varu, Vartheim Vetergis, Vant or Gulli, Uns Thrior Quomu, Thorsa Mojar, O Motkar Mjok, or Jotunheimum. They played board games, probably Hnefatafl, the chess-like board game, in the yard. They were cheerful, Tetir. There was, for them, Vartheim, no lack, Vetergis vant, of gold, or gulli, until 3 came. Ladies, young women of the giants. So 3 young women from the giants, Thor, Mojar, Thorsa. Very mighty, Mjok Omotkar, from the homes of the giants, or Jotunheimum. Stanza 9, this is one of the 9th stanzas, so I'll go through this word by word. Tho gengu regen ol, o rokstóla, gin heilo goð, ok that gatusk. Hver skuldi dverga, drotin skepja, or bremis blóði, ok or blóm legium. Then walked gods all onto fate stools, event stools, powerful holy gods, and about it they discussed with one another. Who should of dwarves lord shape out of Brimir's blood and out of blue legs? So the first half we've seen before. The gods all went to their seats and they talked with one another. That gin halog, that gin word, comes up in runes too, as an old word for powerful that apparently has some sort of supernatural association. So powerful and holy, gin halog. And here they discuss who should make the Lord of the Dwarves out of the blood of Brimir. This is probably Ymir, the original living being. Again, judging from the explanation about creation that's in Snorri Sturluson's Prose Edda. And out of blue legs, since blue, blor, is the color of rotting corpses, this is presumably just out of his rotten flesh. That also jives with what Snorri says in the Prose Edda. Stanza 10. Þar var mótsognir, meðstur orðin, dverga allra, en durin annar. Þeir mannlíkon morg gorðu, dvergar or jorðu, sem durin sagði. There was Mótsognir, greatest become. So Mótsognir was the greatest, had become the greatest of them, of all the dwarves, dverga allra, and Durin the second Anar. They made many men's likenesses, manlikon, the dwarves out of the earth, as Durin said. And now we get into the famous Catalogue of the Dwarves, several stanzas in which we basically just get names of dwarves. Some of these have obvious meanings, some of them don't. I mostly prefer just to leave them untranslated myself because the names seem to have more of a word picture to them than a literal meaning to them. Stanza 11. Nyi ok niði, norðri ok suðri, austri ok vestri, alþjófur dvalin, bívor, bóvor, bombur, nóri, on ok onar, oi mjóð vitnir. So, Nyi and Niði, these may refer to phases of the moon. Norðri and Suðri, that's north and south. Austri og vestri, that's east and west. Alþjófur, all thief. dwalin, delayed, bivor, bovor, bomber, nori, on, and onar, oi, mjóðvitnir. Mjóðvitnir would be something like mead witness. The others are a little less clear. Notice, of course, that J.R.R. Tolkien famously took many of these names for dwarves in The Hobbit. Veger ok Gandolver, Windolver Throin, Thekker ok Thorin, Thror, Vitter ok Litter, Nor ok Nyróður, Nu hef ég dverga, Regen ok Róðsvíðar, Ret Taldu. Ret Talda. Excuse me. So Veger, drink, and Gandolver, staff elf, Windolver, wind elf, Throin, Thekker, known, and Thorin, dried up, withered. Thror, Vitter ok Litter, so wise and color. Nor, perhaps corpse, and Nyróður, new advised. Now I have counted Nu heavy ek Talda, the dwarves dverga, correctly, Ret, and then we get a couple more names, Regen and Róðsvíðar, Róðsvíðar being counsel wise, wise in advice, and then Regen, of course, is the name of the dwarf who fosters Sigurður, the great hero of the saga, the Volsungs. Stanza 13. Fili, Kili, Fundin Noli, Hepti Vili, Hannar Svíur, Fror, Hornbori, Frægr ok Loni, Árvangur, Jari, Ekinskjaldi. Fili, Kili. Fili could be related to file, like the smith's tool. Fundin Noli. Fundin, found. Noli, perhaps from knoll, nail. Hefti, Vili, Hanar, Svíur, Fror, shiny. Hornbori, horn bearer. Frægr ok Loni, Frægr, famous. Árvangur, so perhaps earth plane. Jari, and Ekinskjaldi, oaken shield. Stanza 14. Mol dverga I dvalins liði, ljóna kindum til lofars telja. Þér sotu frá salarsteini, Árvanga sjót til Jóruvala. The matter or the business is to count Mol telja, the dwarves dverga, in Dvalin's company, I Dvalin's liði, in, and this is apparently the same, or perhaps for the children of men, Kindum Leona, to Lovar, who is probably another dwarf based on the fact that his name comes up a little bit later. Those ones there who sought from their Steini Salar, so from the stone of a hall, the whatever Árvangi is a little bit difficult to say. This could be earth plane. Sjót is then a residence, so they sought a residence on an earthen plane to Yoru Valley, or some valleys. Stanza 15. Þar var draupnir ok dogthrasir, hor Hauksbóri, hlevangur glói, skýrvir, virvir, skófithir oi. So there was Draupnir, also the name of Odin's ring, related to the verb for to drop, drip, and dogthrasir. Hor, high, or perhaps if you buy one unpopular interpretation of this word, it could also mean one-eyed. I'm not going to get into that, never mind. Hauksbóri, so perhaps burial mound, Haug, and then tracer or something with Spori. A lot of these names, again, are not super clear in the way they're formed. Hlevangur, Vangur is plain or valley, glowy, maybe that means exactly what it sounds like in English, glowy. Skirvir, virvir, skålfithir, and oi. Oi could be great-grandfather based on the use of that same name in Ríkisþula. Stanza 16. Olver ok yngvi, Ekinskjaldi, fjallar ok frosti, finnur ok ginar, that mun uppi meðan old libir, langniðjatal lovars havat. So we've got Olver, elf, and Yngvi, also probably a name of the god Freyr. We've got Oakenshield again, Ekinskjaldi, fjallar ok frosti, frosti means exactly what it sounds like, finnur ok ginar. Finnar would imply a Finn, or really a Sami, from the way that word is used in Old Norse. It will be up, the word be, vera, left out, as it often is in Old Norse in these constructions, and something being up means famous, so it will be famous while the age lives, while the world lives. The count tall of the long descendants of Lovar heaved, or had. Either way, it's an unusual past participle, but it will be held up, perhaps, Thatman havat upi, while the world lives, the names of these descendants of Lovar. Stanza 17, we were suddenly jolted back into the greater affairs of the gods. Uns thrir quomu, urthvi lithi, obulgir ok ostgir, asir at husi, fundu Orlandi, lit megandi, ask ok emblu, urlog lausa. Until 3 masculine came out of that company, that group, powerful Ovulgir and loving, passionate Ostgir, Asir, of course, the dominant family of the gods, to a house, Athusi. This has also been interpreted as being a residence, more broadly, perhaps meaning Midgard, the residence of human beings. They found on land little powerful Lit Megandi, Oscar, and Embla, fateless Urlog Lausa. So these are the first human beings, Oscar and Embla. Stanza 18, one of our 9th stanzas, so I'll do this word by word. As we continue talking about the first human beings. On thou ne otu, o thou ne hovdu, lo ne lati, ne litu goda. Ond gav Odin, Oth gav Hunir, lo gav Lothar, ok litu goda. They, Oscar and Embla, you can tell it's them because this is a neuter, so it means a masculine and a feminine. They had no soul. They had no spirit. Ond and Oth, Other, are both spirit or soul. They had no hair, law, nor lati, voice, nor good colors or appearances, goda, litu. Odin gave spirit, Odin gav ond. Hunir gave soul, Hunir gave Oth. Lothar gave hair, Lothar gav law, and good looks, ok goda litu. Hunir is mentioned elsewhere in Våluspá. He's one of the gods we'll see who will survive Ragnarok. He occasionally comes up just randomly elsewhere, but he's a very obscure figure. Lothar, not known outside of Våluspá to my recollection. Possibly a name for another figure. Stanza 19. Ask vet extanda, hetir Yggdrasil. Hor badmr, ausen huita auri. Þaðan koma dogvar, þers I Dalafalla. Stender über grunn, urðar brunni. I know an ash tree, Oscar. Notice, Yggdrasil is an ash tree, and an ash tree is also the name of the first human man. It is called Yggdrasil, a high tree, hor badmr, sprinkled with white clay, ausen huita auri. From there, Þaðan, come dews, koma dogvar, those which there fall into valleys, I dala. It stands forever, stender green, grun, over the well of Urður. Yggdrasil, of course, the name of this tree is fascinating because Ygr is a common name of Odin that we see in Norse poetry, and Drasil means tree. I mean, not tree, it means horse. So the name of the tree is literally like the horse of Odin, or Odin horse, probably in reference to the fact that he hangs himself on it and hovamal, and so he rides it. And in Norse poetry, there's often a little bit of gallows humor, literally gallows humor here. You ride the gallows, just like you ride a horse. The sprinkled with white clay, a little bit mysterious. There must be some significance to that, and story may not have it right. Also notice in the 6th line, thers I Dalafalla, we've got that S, which is the abbreviation of the word S, which is the more archaic form of is or who or which. That suggests, of course, an earlier date for this poem, at least than 1200, when S is replaced by Er. In stanza 20, we encounter the Norns, who live at the root of the tree. Thadan koma moir marks vitandi, þrjár þeim sa, erun þoli stendur. Urð hetu eina, aðra verðandi, skaru skíði, skuld a þriðju, þar logðu, þar líf kuru, alda bornum, urlog segja. From there come maidens, young women, knowing much, marks vitandi. 3 out of that body of water, that's them sa, which stands under the tree, stendur und þoli. They call one hetu eina urð, so urður is one of the Norns. The other one verðandi, second one of the Norns. They carve on a wooden plank, skoru skíði. Skíð also, of course, being what becomes the English word ski, by a loan from modern Norwegian ski. And the third one, skuld. So these are the 3 Norns, the 3 goddesses of destiny. I've talked about their names elsewhere. Urður is related to the past participle of become, so what has become, what has happened. Verðandi to the present participle of it, so what is happening, what is becoming. And skuld means, much like what its English cognate should means, it's what ought to happen perhaps. But it means ought, should. They, thar, they laid laws, logðu log. They chose lives, koru leave, for sons of men, bornum alda. The fates of men, urlog segja. So segja could be the genitive plural of segir, which is a poetic word for men. It could also be an obscure or incorrectly copied form of the word segja to say, so they say fates. But I'd rather correct the text as minimally as possible and say segja, genitive plural of segir. Stanza 21. That man hon folkvig fyrst I heimi, gulveg ur gerum studu, och I hol hors hana brendu. Þrisvar brendu, þrisvar borna, oft ósjaldan, þó hon enn lifir. She, the vulva or witch or seeress who is narrating this, remembers the first people battle, folkvig. Of course, folk can also mean army, and the people in this question are, of course, gods. The first battle in the world, the Heimi, when they steadied, studu from the verb stythia, which is to steady, when they steadied gulveg with spears, gerum. And in the hall of Hor, that is the hall of Odin, so Valhall, they burned her brendu hana. They burned her 3 times, brendu þrisvar. She was reborn 3 times, borna þrisvar. That borna is a past participle, singular accusative feminine. This is probably referring to her in the accusative because she is the object of that verb brendu in the previous line. Often, oft, unseldom, ósjaldan, though still she lived, þó enn hon lifir. Now the name Gulveg has inspired a lot of speculation. It's not attested anywhere else. Veg is sometimes found in women's names as it can mean drink, but gul is gold, so what is gold? Drink. It really only occurs here, and so there's a lot of speculation, but no one is 100% sure what's going on, and the next couple stanzas don't really help with this mystery. Stanza 22. Heiði hana hetu, hvar til húsa kom, Voluspá. Viti hon ganda, seið hon kunni, seið hon leikin, var hon angan, illrar þjóðar. They called her, hetu hana, heiðar, heiði in the accusative, wherever she came, kom to houses, till husa. Now, who are they calling Hather? Is this Gulveig or is this somebody different? In fact, is this Hather actually the Volva or Cirrus who's narrating the poem, considering that she sometimes speaks about herself in the third person? It could be, and she might or might not be the same person as Gulveig. Just a lot of questions without answers. Certainly you can speculate about the answers, but in just looking at the text, remember the text does not spell out the answers for us. And another thing is that Hus, remember earlier in Våluspá in the stanza, one moment, when Odin and Hunter and Lothar are down on Midgard. Stanza 17, Midgard is referred to as a house, so house might mean realm here when she came to the realms rather than just two literal constructed houses. Anyway, they called her Hather wherever she came to houses or realms. A well-prophesying Våluspá Volva, witch or Cirrus. She called on Hon Viti, from Vitya to call on. Vitya to call on takes a genitive object, so then Ganda is the genitive plural of Gandr, which is some kind of tool used in magic, perhaps a wand or a staff. She called on magic tools, magic staves perhaps. She knew Hon Kuni save. This is usually referred to as dark magic in translations of Old Norse poetry, but it's magic associated with women and with seeing the future. And then save here is actually probably the past participle of the verb to practice save magic, sitha. So she practiced save. She played. It's hard to exactly put together what to do with this, because leikin is a past participle of leika, to play. It could be that save here is still the object, and that the verb is still kuni, so like she knew, played magic, or she cast the magic. Save is the past participle of sitha. She cast that magic and it was played. But in some way it's reiterating the fact that she knows and practices this Sather magic. She was forever Honvar the joy, Angan, of an evil people, Ilrar Þjóðar. So Gulveig and Hather, very mysterious figures, and it's completely unclear from the text itself whether they're the same person or not, and whether one of them, probably Hather, is actually the witch or Volva who's speaking the poem. 23. Thó gengu regin ol og rokstóla, gin heilo góð, og that gattusk hvort skildu æsir afróð gjalda, eða skildu góðin ol gildi eiga. We've seen the first half of this before. Then all the gods went on their judgment seats, those very holy gods, and they took counsel about it. Whether the Asir, Hort Asir, should, skildu, yield a tribute, Gjalda Avróð. Avróð can also be used about a great loss, so yield a loss, endure a loss. Eða, or all the gods, Olgóðin, should, skildu, have repayment, eiga gildi. So should they pay some kind of tribute, suffer a loss, or should they get repayment for some harm that's been done to them? Stanza 24. Flög the Odin och I folk scout, that var en folkvig fyrst I heimi. Brotin var borðvegur, borgar Åsa, knotu vanir Hauksbók Voluspá. Odin made fly through, no doubt throwing his characteristic spear, and into army or people shot, scout, being a filler word. That was still, that var en, battle first in the world. That was still the first battle or war in the world. Fyrst folkvig I heimi. The wall, borðvegur, of the gods, Åsa, city, borgar, so the wall of the god's city of Osgarður was broken, var brotin. The Vanir, one of the families of gods, knew war prophecy, knotu Hauksbók. Now knotu is the past plural third person of kno, to know. This is a verb for know that is cognate with English know, but it's not the typical verb for know in Old Norse, which is vita. This is usually used just in poetry. And then vig, battle, war, killing, spå, prophecy. They knew war prophecy or war magic perhaps, but specifically some kind of ability perhaps to prophesy the end of a battle. And they kick the plains or trod the plains. Now, part of what's unclear from Voluspá itself is whether this is a war between Aesir and Vanir, or if the Aesir and Vanir are fighting alongside one another against some other enemy. Snorri interpreted it, or seems to have interpreted it, since he's basing a lot of the prose on Voluspá, as a battle between Aesir and Vanir, but you could interpret Voluspá other ways. Stanza 25, we get this predictable first half again. Thor gengu regen ol o rock stola, gin halo goth, och that gatos hverir hefði loft alt levi blandit, eða at jotans oaths moi gefna. So after that first half we've seen before, hverir, who had blended hefði blandit, all the air alt loft with deception, lavi, the dative singular of la, deception, or given, gevna, the girl, moi, of Other to the family of the giants. So the gods took counsel among one another, thought gatus, because they've done before, to find out who had blended the sky with deception, i.e. who had lied. When you lie, you speak deception into the wind. You blend the sky, the wind, with deception. Or who had given the girl of Other to the family of the giant. Now, Other is said to be the husband of Freyja, so probably Freyja is what's meant here. 26. Thor ein þar var þrungin móði, hann sjaldan sitter hann slíkt fregn, og gengusk eðar orð og söri, mól olmeginleg ó meðal forum. Thor alone there was pressed in mood, þrungin móði, angry. He seldom sits, hann sjaldan sitter, when he learns hann fregn slíkt, such, when he learns such. Oaths eðar broken, gengusk ó, walked upon, broken oaths. Words and sworn things, orð og söri, these are also all gengus, these are also broken. So broken oaths, broken words, broken sworn things. Important or powerful, meginleg, all words, all these important words, which had passed between, foru og meðal. So Thor is angry about some kind of broken oath between two sides, perhaps. It's long been suspected that these two stanzas about how the sky has been poisoned by deception, and Thor is angry and wants to fight, and there's these broken oaths, refer to the story that Snorri tells in the prose about Loki getting the Jotun, or giant builder, to make the wall around Osgarður, and the gods break their promise to give him Freyja, the sun and the moon, when they find out that he actually is going to complete the wall in the time that has been allotted to him. It is not, however, certain if that's what it refers to, because again, Voluspá is so elusive. 27. Veit hon heimdalar hljóð folgit, under heið vonum helgum badmi, og ser hon ásask aurgum forsi af veði valfóðurs. Vitu þeir enn, eða what? This is one of the 9 stanzas, so I'll take it word by word. Knows she Heimdallr's possessive, hearing, filler word, hidden, under bright accustomed, heið vonum, possibly bright lacking, holy tree. River sees she to flow from, I'm saying from because it's dative, muddy waterfall, from of pledge of slaughter father Odin. Know you, plural, y'all, yet or what? So she knows where is sort of left out here, where Heimdallr's hearing is hidden under the bright, I'm going to say bright because the tree, Yggdrasil, is probably bright rather than dark, the bright holy tree. Heið Vonr is kind of interesting because Heither is bright, Vonr can be accustomed, which is why I would say bright accustomed as being just extra bright. It can also mean lacking, so maybe lacking in brightness, maybe because it's shady. You could take it one way or the other. She, or I, since it's the vulva speaking, she sees a river flow, or Al says often sprinkle, but in this reflexive use, flow makes good sense because it's probably springing up from the ground. Flow from the muddy waterfall from the pledge of Odin, Odin's eye. Of course, Odin is the slaughter father, Valfather. Do you know yet, or what? And that do you know yet, or what is probably addressed to Odin as the one asking the vulva to talk about the beginning and end of the world and the mystery she knows. 28. Ein sat hon uti tho erin aldni kom, igungur osa, ok I auga leit. Hvers fregnið mig, hui fristið mín, alt veit ek Odin hvar þú auga falt, I inno mera mimis bruni. Drekker mjóð mimir morgin hverjan, af veði Valfóðurs, vitu therein, eða what? She sat alone outside, hon sat ein uti. When tho the old one in Aldni, came, the frightener of the gods. Igingur, frightener, is just one of Odin's names, so this is Odin, Odin of the Aesir. And looked late into eyes, I augu. What do you ask me? Where's fregnith mig? Notice she addresses Odin in the plural, which is respectful in Old Norse. That also helps explain why it's vituth en, do y'all know yet, instead of veits thu en. Why do you test me? Hui frestith me? I know all, Odin. I know everything. Ek veit alt. Where you hid where you hid your eye, although you usually don't say your with body parts in Old Norse. Whar thu falt auga. In the famous well of Mimir, I inu mera mimisbruni. Mimir drinks mead, Mimir drekker mjóð, every morning, hverjan morgen, from the pledge of Valfóður, again his eye. Do you know yet, or what? 29. Valdi henni herfóður hringa og menn, fe spjólspakleg og spóganda, så hon vit og vit og verrot hverja. Herfóður, army father, another name for Odin, chose for her, Valdi henni, rings and necklaces, hringa og men, money, fe, wise speech, spakleg spjol, and prophecy tools, spåganda. There's that magic tool word, gander again, and spå, prophecy, like in the name Våluspá. She saw, again, I saw, this is the vulva speaking of herself, saw widely and widely around, hon saw vit och vit around every world, of hverja verld. And that of is, of course, the old filler word or preposition about or around, suggesting the greater age of this poem. 30. Sa hon valkyrjor vit komnar gorvar att rida till gåþjóðar. Skuld helt skildi en skogolonor, Gunnar hilder gondel och gerskogel. Nu taldar nonor herjans, gorvar att rida grund valkyrjor. She saw Valkyries come from widely, komnar vit, ready to ride, gorvar at rida, to the god nation, the god people, Godþjóð. Schooled, these are names of Valkyries. Schooled held a shield. Now, halda, the verb to hold, takes a dative. That's why skildi is dative, not accusative skilled. And skogel is another. Honor is feminine nominative singular, so that is skogel is another, not she held another. And then more names of Valkyries, Gunnar, Hildur, Gondel, Gerskogel. Now are counted the women of Herjan, Herjan being another name of Odin, ready to ride the ground, the earth, the Valkyries, Valkyr. 31. Ek so Baldri blóðgum tífur Óðins barni orlog volgen. Stóð vaksin volum herri mjór og mjógfager nistiltein. I saw, ek saw, and then I'm going to go to line 4, the hidden fates, volgen urlog, for Baldr, because he's dative, that's why I'm taking him, not as the direct object of saw. The bloodied god, Odin's son. Mistletoe, I'm going to the last line in the set of 4 again. The mistletoe stood grown high over the plain, stóð vaksin herri volum, soft and very pretty, mjór og mjóg fager. 32. Varð af þeim meiði mer syndisk, harmflaug hatleg, hoður nam skjóta. Baldrs bróðir var ofborin snemma, so nam Odins sonur ein vega. There came from that tree varð of they meði, which seemed soft syndisk mar, a dangerous harm shot or sorrow shot, hatleg harmflaug. Hoður took a shot, hoður nam skjóta. Baldr's brother was born soon, early, snemma. He killed Sonam Vega, Odin's son, one night old, ein natur. 33. Þó hann eva hendur ne hovuð kemdi oður óbál bar Baldrs anskota. En frig gret í fensolum vo Valhallar, vituð eren eða what. He never washed his hands, han þó eva hendur, nor combed his head, ne kemdi hovuð, before he bore bar onto a funeral pyre or ball Baldr's enemy, Baldr's andskota. Literally Baldr's against shooter, which makes sense as a description of Hodur. And Frigg wept, Frigg gret in Fensalir, that's Frigg's dwelling place, the woe of Valhalla, which of course is the death of Baldr. Do you know yet, or what? 34. Haf so hun ligja under huera lundi, lagjarn liki, loka åthekjan. Dar sitter sigen, þauki sínum ver vel glúð, vitu eren eða what. She saw a prisoner hopped lying under a grove of hot springs or cauldrons, some kind of volcanic location. Lying yearning, deception yearning, lag yarn. And Loki like Loka Olthekjan in body. So someone similar to Loki in body and deceptive. This is Loki himself, none other than Loki. There sits Sigyn, that's Loki's wife, Thar sitter Sigyn, though she is not well cheered about her husband. Þauki vel glúð sínum ver. Do you know yet, or what? O feller austan, eiterdala, soxum og sverðum, slíðr heitir sú. A river falls from the east in dales of poison, valleys of poison, eiterdala, full of blades and swords, soxum og sverðum. The full of is based on the fact that those are in dative. That river, Sú, is named Slíðr. Stanza 36 is one of the ninth stanzas, so I'll make sure to go word by word. Stóð fyrir norðan og níða volum, salar or guli, sindra ættar, en annar stóð og ókolni, bjór salar jótuns, en så brimir heitir. Stood to the north, fyrir norðan, on dark valleys, níða volum, a hall, salar, out of gold, made of gold, or guli, of the family of Sindri. Sindra Attar. Sindri is a dwarf. And another stood, and annar stóð, on uncooler Okolni, a beer hall, bjórsalar, of a giant, Jotuns, and that one, Brimir, is named. So, toward the north, in dark valleys, Niðavellir, there is a golden hall that belongs to dwarves, and there's another one on Okolnir, uncooler, that is a beer hall of a giant, and that is called Brimir. Well, both the giant Jotun and the hall itself, Salar, is masculine, so technically Brimir could be the name of the giant or of the hall, just reading this stanza. Stanza 37. Sal so hon standa solu fjari, nostrandu a. Norður horfa dur, fellu eiterdropar in ljóra, så undin salar orma hrygjum. She saw a hall stand, hon saw Sal standa, and of course the witch refers to herself as with hon and ek, she and I. Far from the sun, fjari solu, on corpse beach, Nastrond. The doors face north, dyr horfa norður. Poison drops fell, eitrdropar fellu, inside through the opening in the roof in Umliora. That is wound, tied, that hall is wound or tied with the spines, hrygium, of serpents, orma. 38. Sa hon thar vada thungas trauma men mensvara och morðvarga, och thans annars gleppur oira runu. Þar saug nýðhókur nói framgengna, sleit vargar vera, vituð en eða what. She saw there wade thick streams, curse-sworn, bad-sworn men who had broken oaths, and murder wolves, so murderers. And that one who confuses Glepper, another's ear secret keeper, another's girlfriend. So she saw men who had broken their oaths, or who had murdered, or who had seduced someone else's girlfriend or woman, and they were wading thick streams. Boy, all the birds are back. I heard a hummingbird. They're sucked, Nidhogr sucked there, the corpses of the dead, Noi Framgengna. The monster, Vargar, it often means wolf, but it can mean monsters more generally in poetry, broke men, Vargar sleit vera. Do you know yet, or what? Vidu there and the what? 39. Auster satt in Aldna I Jornvidi, och fyti þar Fenris kindir. Verður af þeim Olum eina nokkur tunguls tjugari I trolls hami. Eastward sat the aged, and this will be someone feminine because Aldna is feminine nominative singular weak adjective, in Ironwood, Jornvidr, and gave birth there, Fudithar, Fenrir's children. There comes from them all a certain one of ones, Nokkur Ena, a moon's, Tungul's leader. Now, Tugari can also specifically mean pitchforker. That is an idiom for pitchforker. So someone who pitchforks the moon, destroys the moon, in a troll's skin, a troll's hami. 40. Fylisk fjorfi fegra manna rýður Ragnasjót ráðum droira. Svart var þó sólskin of sumar eftir, veður olvolind, vituð en eða what. So, that one is filled with the life, Fylisk fjorfi, of doomed men, fegra manna. Reddens rýður, the gods' homes, Ragnasjót, with red blood, ráðum droira. Black was then sunshine, svart var þó sólskin of sumar eftir, through all the summers after, through summers after all summer eftir. The weather all woe-mooded, all woeful weather, volund feather. Do you know yet, or what? 41. Satt þar ó haugi og sló horpu, gígjar hirðir, gladar egðir, gól honum I gaglviði, fagarráðar hanni, saw fjallar heitir. Sat there on a mound, a burial mound, and struck a harp, a herdsman of a giant woman, so presumably a giant herder, the glad Egther, cheerful Egther. They're saying near him, golum honum, in Gaglviði, that means goosewood or birdwood, a fair red rooster, which is named Fjallar. 42. Gól awesum gulin kambi, so vekker holda at herja fóðurs, en annar gellar fyrjord neðan, so tráður hanni at solum heljar. There sings around the gods gól awesum, gulin kambi, golden comb, a good name for a rooster. That one, Sol, awakes men vekker holda at herjafóðurs, at warfathers, that means at Odin's place. In Old Norse, you can say at Odin's to mean at Odin's place or at Odin's house, just like in English you can say at Matt's to mean at Matt's house. And another one sings an anargeller beneath the earth, neðan fyrir jörð, a soot-red rooster sot rauderhani at the halls of hell at Solum Heljar. Stanza 43 is going to get repeated a few times. Goir garmer mjok fyr genipa helli, fester mun slitna en frekki renna. Fjold vet hon fröda, fram sek lengra, Ragnarok rom sigtiva. Barks, garmer mjok, garmer barks a great deal before genipa hellir. These are caves in hell. The chains will break, Festermun slitna, and the wolf run, Frekki rena. Frekki literally means greedy, and it's the name of one of Odin's wolves, but it can mean a wolf in general. She, again, the Volva or witch, knows a great deal of wisdom. Hon vet fjold fröda. I, now she's calling herself I, one line later, I see forward longer, exe fram lengra, about the bitter Ragnarok, rom Ragnarok, of the victory gods, sig tiva. And of course, Ragnarok itself means the events of the gods, fates of the gods, rok, Ragna. Now, stanza 44 gives us the famous description of what's happening down on earth below. Bröder munu berjask och at bonum verda, munu systrungar sivium spilla, hart eri heimi, hor domer mikil, skegold, skolmold, skildiru klovnir, vindold vargold, otherworld stoipisk mun engi mader odrum thurma. Brothers will fight each other, berjask, sk being the reciprocal suffix, and become killers, verda at bonum, by implication, killers of each other. Cousin Sistringar will break the bonds, the peace of kinship, munu spilla civium. It is hard in the world, hart eri hemi, great whoredom, mikil whoredom, or adultery. A axe age, skeg is technically beard, but it's used in poetry often to mean axe. Axe age, skeg old, skolmold, sword age. Shields are cloven or split. Nru, of course, is a contraction for eru, are. A wind age, vindold, a wolf age, vargold. Before the world sinks, otherworld, stoipisk, will no man, when engimader, respect another. Thirma, odrum. Sounds like teaching an undergraduate classroom. So we begin with stanza 45, and this is one of the 9th stanzas. So as my tradition goes, I'll read it through word by word as well. Leika mím sinir en mjótuður kundisk at inu galla gjallar horni. Hot blas heimdallar, horn o lotti, mælir Odin við míms höfuð. So word by word that would go, play memes, possessive sons, but fate is kindled, kundisk, at the loud gjallarhorn, yeller horn. High blows Heimdallr, horn is in air, speaks Odin with Mím's head. So Mím's sons, these particular individuals are not named anywhere, but these are presumably some kind of giants. They play, and fate is kindled, mjótaður kundisk. I like this word mjótaður for fate because it is from the same root as meta, to measure, to mete out. And of course in Beowulf you see this is a common word for fate, metod. At the loud gjallarhorni. This adjective gala here, of course, that's neuter dative singular weak. So we would look up galar in the dictionary. I don't believe this occurs elsewhere in Old Norse, but it is probably loud based on Swedish galskrika, which means to scream loud. And of course, gjallarhorni, yeller horn, that is the horn of Heimdallr. Heimdallr blows high, hot, that's literally high, but of course, in Old Norse, you can mean something's literally high up in the air, or it can mean loud, just like you would say high volume in English. The horn, gjallarhorn, is in the air, and Odin speaks with Mím's head. Now, of course, Odin has the head of Mimir pickled to tell him Mimir's wisdom. He's called Mimir in Ynglinga Saga, where we get that story, but in this text in Våluspá, he's called Mimr, so genitive memes, rather than mimus, which we would expect from mimir. 46. Ymer it aldna trä, en jotun losnar, skelvur Yggdrasils asker standandi. The old, the aged tree, it aldna trä, groans, Ymer, and a giant is loosened, losnar, is freed. This might refer to Loki or perhaps his son Fenrir becoming loose from their imprisonments. Yggdrasil's asker, ash tree of Yggdrasil, shakes Skelver, standing. So it shakes, but it still stands. Notice that Yggdrasil, which is an ash tree, is often referred to as Yggdrasil's asker, ash tree of Yggdrasil, just as Fenrir, who is a wolf, is often referred to as Fenris Ulfr, wolf of Fenrir. Stanza 47 repeats stanza 43, so I'll read it in Old Norse for full effect, but I won't repeat the translation here. Refer to the previous video with stanza 43. Goer nu garmer mjok hur gnipa helli, fester mun slitna en frekki renna, fjold vet hon fröda fram seg lengra, Ragnarok rom sigtiva. Stanza 48. Frumr, ekkur austan hevisk lind fyr, snusk jormungander I jotunmóði. Ormur knur unir en arri hlakkar, sliter nói neffuller, nagelfar losnar. Hrymr, probably a giant, drives from the east. He heaves before himself, hevier fyrir sig, a shield. Jormungander, of course, the great monster, Midgard's Ormur, the Midgard serpent, turns itself, snur sig, snusk, in a jotunmóður, a giant mood, giant rage. This is often used of evil creatures when they go into some kind of rage, although Thor also goes into an equivalent, osmóður, god rage or god mood. Ormur, worm, serpent, of course referring back to Jormungander, the Midgard serpent. That serpent beats waves, knir unir, and an eagle, Ari, hlakkar, looks forward to, or of eagles shrieks. Either way makes sense. Of course, the eagle is going to be looking forward to a dinner of corpses, or perhaps shrieking in anticipation. Neffolr, sliter, noi. Now, neffolr, that means nose, pale, that of course refers to the beak of the eagle, which is yellow or pale. So the pale-beaked eagle breaks, sliter, corpses, noi. It's accused of plural of nor, corpse. Nagelfar, loosens, is freed. So of course Nagelfar means nail ship. Snorri in the prose edda tells us that that means fingernail ship, although there is nothing in the poetic edda to imply that it necessarily is made of fingernails rather than just that this refers to its construction out of nails, like a ship would be constructed out of. Stanza 49. Kjol fer austan, koma munu muspels log lyðir, en Loki styrir, fara fífls megir með frekka allir, þeim bróðir bíleipts í for. A ship travels from the east, Austan. Muspel's sons, Muspel's leader, or just Muspel's people, giants at any rate, will come, Munu Koma, over the sea, Log. And Loki steers Nagelfar, the ship, and Loki styrir. Fífl's Mehir, monster's sons, Fara, go. All of them, Alir, so all the monster sons go, med frekka, with wolf, and with them Thame is the brother, bróðir of Bíleiptr, that means Loki, so the brother Bíleiptr is Loki, so Loki is with them in that journey, E4 in journey. Stanza 50. Hvater med osum, What med olvum, gnur aller Jotunheimur, äsiru og þingi, stunja dvergar, för steindurum, vegbergs visir, vitu therein, eða what. What is with gods? Awesome is dative plural to Asir, the major family of gods. What is with elves? All Jotunheimur groans gnur. The Asir gods are at a meeting, eru all thingi. The dwarves groan, there's a lot of groaning going on here. Dvergar stunja before their stone doors, für steindurum. Wise of Wall Mountain, Visir Vegbergs. This probably implies something about the dwarves being particularly wise in matters of stone. Wise goes with dwarves because it's Visir, masculine nominative plural, as is Dvergar. Do you know yet, or what? Vitu therein, eða what? 51. Sortur fer sunnan med svega lävi, skín af sverði sól valtífa, grjótbjörg gnata en gífurrata, tróða hallir helveg en himinn klofnar. Surtur, of course, this is an evil being, a Jotun, one of the earliest living beings in creation according to Snorri's Prose Edda, associated with fire. He comes from the south, Fersunan, with a twig's bane, Misfika labi. Sviki is twig, la is breaker or bane, so of course what is a twig's bane? Fire. So he comes from the south with fire. It shines from the sword, Skeen af Sverdi, the son of the slaughter gods, Voltiva. So the sun shines from the sword, off of the sword. Grjótbjörg rocks, Gnata crash, and giant women, Givur, roam, Rata, or fall. Fall is probably more likely here. Men, Hallir, tread, walk the hell road, Helveg, and heaven is split, and Himin klofnar. Stanza 52. Þó kumur hlýnar harmur annar fram, Odin fer við úlvega, en banni belja bjartur at surti, þó mun frigjar falla angantur. Then comes Friggs. Hlín is an alternative name of Frigg, so hlínar being the genitive singular, this means of Frigg. Harm second forward, so then Frigg's second sorrow comes to be. When Odin goes, Odin fer to fight against the wolf, vega vid ulv. And the killer of Beli, Bani Belia, that means Freyr, since Freyr killed the giant Beli, bright at sword. So the bright killer of Beli, bright Freyr, comes against Surtur at Surti. Then will Frigg's Angantyr fall. Now, Angantyr is a name. This is actually several characters' names, in, for instance, the Saga of Hervor and Heidrek. It literally is joy god, so her beloved god. Of course, meaning Odin, her husband. 53. Þó kumur in mikli Mogur Sigfóður, Vidar vega at Valduri, Lætur hann megi hveðrungs mundum standa hjör til hjarta, þó hefind fóður. Then comes the great son of Victory Father, so then comes Odin, Victory Father's great son, Vidar, to fight at the slaughter animal, at Valduri. He lets Han Lætur, he lets the sword, Hjor, accused of singular, stand, standa, in the mouth, mund, of the son of Loki, Megi Hweðrungs. Hweðrungur being another name of Loki. So he lets his sword stand into the mouth of Fenrir, son of Loki. And of course, Megi Hweðrungs is dative because with body parts you use the dative show possessive rather than the accusative. All the way to the heart, so to heart, til hjarta. Then is avenged his father. Thor heaven father, then is avenged father. Notice father is genitive singular of father because you avenge something in the genitive. 54, this is Thor's final battle. Since it's one of the 9 stanzas, I'll make sure to go through it word by word. Thor kummer in meri moger loðinjar, gengur Odin sonur við úlvega. Drepur hann af móði miðgars vegur, munu hallir allir heimstóð ryðja, gengur fett níu fjörgunjar búr, neppur frá naðri nýts ókvíðnum. Word by word in English, that would be, then comes the famous son of Hlöðin. Hlöðin is the earth, so of course this means Thor. He goes, gengur, Odin's son, Odin's sonur, against wolf to fight with Úlfega. Kills he of rage, drepur hann af móði, Midgard's vegur, Midgard's protector, again, Thor, will men all world place, home place, rid, goes steps 9, Fjorgen's son, Fjorgen being another name for the earth, short of life, Nepper, from snake, frá naðri, anxious of hateful deed, ókvíðnum needs, that's the snake that's unanxious about its hateful deed. So in more idiomatic English, then the famous son of the earth comes, Thor. Odin's son, Thor, goes to fight the wolf, gengur, vega við úlf. He kills in his anger, hann drepur af móði. He is Midgard's vegur, Midgard's protector. All men will leave the earth, the world, the home place, ryðja heimstöð. Earth's son, Fjörgenjarbur, walks 9 steps, gengur níu fett, short of life, Nepper, from that snake, which is unanxious about its hateful deed, ókvíðnum needs. Stanza 55, Sol ter sortna, sigur foldi mar, hverfa af himni heiðar stjörnur, geisa reimi við aldernara, leikar hor hitti við himin sjálfan. The sun turns black. Now, ter, this is from ter or tjå. This is often just used as a filler verb in poetry, something like does in English, so we could translate this as something like the sun does turn black, ter sortna, since it doesn't say sol sortnar. It's just to fill in the meter, give you another syllable there. So the sun does turn black. Sinks earth into the sea, sigarfoldi mar, the earth sinks into the sea. The bright stars, heiðar stjörnur, disappear from heaven, hverfa af himni. Fire, Amy, rages, geisar, against the life nourisher, við aldernara. Now, what exactly the life nourisher aldernari is, people have debated, but it is most likely to mean Yggdrasil, the world tree. High heat, hor hiti, plays against heaven itself, against the very sky. So fires even reach to the sky itself. 56 just repeats 43 again, so I won't do the translation all over again, but I will read it to keep with the spirit of the thing. Goir nu garmer mjok fyr genipa helli, fester mun slitna en frekki renna, fjold vet hon fröda, fram se ek lengra, Ragnarok, rom sigtiba. 57. Ser hon uppkomma, ålrusinni, jord or ägi, idja gröna, falla forsar, flyger orn över, så å fjalli, fiska veidir. She sees come up, hon ser komma upp, a second time, ålrusinni, earth out of the sea, jord or ägi, evergreen, idja gröna, the earth being evergreen. Waterfalls fall, forsar falla, An eagle flies over. Orn flyger yfir. That one, the eagle, saw, which on the mountain er fjalli hunts fish, veiðir fiska. In Old Norse, you veiða, you hunt fish, just as you would hunt deer or something. 58. Finnask äsir o iðavelli och móðinur mot kan duma och minask þar o megin doma och o fimbultys fornar runar. The Æsir meet Finnas, they find each other on Iðavöllr. This is also a place mentioned at the beginning of Våluspá. And about the earth bowstring mighty, about the mighty earth bowstring, Motkan Moltinir, that is the Midgard serpent, Jormungandr, because that is the thing that is like a bowstring that surrounds the earth. Judge, so they judge Jormungandr. And they remember there, Minaskthar, about the great judgments or great events, Megin Doma, and also about the old runes or old secrets of Fimbultur, and that of course is Odin. So they remember and judge Jormungandr, these great events that have just passed, and also Odin's own mysteries and or runes. 59. Þar munu eftir undersamlegar gulnar tovlur I grassi finnask, þers I ordaga óttar hofðu. There will afterwards the wonderful golden game pieces, tovlur, plural of tavla, be found in the grass, finnask I grassi. Those, the game pieces, which in the early days I ordaga they had owned, hovdu, óttar. And of course, these are the same golden gate pieces also mentioned at the Cretians. There's a little bit of a complete cycle that happens here. 60. Munu ósonir akrar vaksa, bols mun alspatna, Baldr mun koma, búa þeir hóður og Baldr, hropp sig tóftir, vel valtíbar, vittu þeir enn eða what? Unsown fields will grow, ósonir akrar munu vaksa. Every bad thing, every curse, bols will get better. So batna, which means to get better, especially speaking of a disease or an illness, has a genitive object. That's why bols als is genitive rather than nominative. Because when you pacify something, you still use the same case that's used for its object when it's an active. Baldr will come. Baldr will come back from hell. They, including Holdr and Baldr, Their, Holdr, Baldr, live, dwell, Hrofts, that is another name for Odin's victory field, Sigtoftir. So Holdr and Baldr, among others, are going to dwell in Valhall, right, after Ragnarok. Well, those victory gods, Valtívar, or slaughter gods, Valtívar. Do you know yet, or what? 61. Þó knó hunir hlátt við kjósa og búrir byggja bröðra tveggja vindheim víðan. Vittu þeir enn eða what? Then Hunir chooses kjósa, the lot wood, the fate wood, so something associated with fate, some kind of token, perhaps, like might be used in divination. Now, knó is another one of those filler words like ter, that doesn't necessarily actually add semantic content. You just say something like, then does Honir choose the fate wood. And the sons, Burir, of the two brothers, Bröðra Tveggja, maybe sons of Baldr and Holdr, will dwell in wide Windhome, that is in heaven, Vindheim Vidan. Do you know yet, or what? 62. Sal ser hon standa solu fegra gulli þaktan og gimle. Þar skulu dugvar dróttir byggja og aldardaga undis njóta. She sees a hall stand fairer than the sun, fegra solu, thatched, roofed with gold, þaktan gulli, on gimle, which can literally be read as fire shelter, but some kind of hall that will be inhabited after Ragnarok. There, faithful men, Dygvar Drotir, faithful troops, shall dwell, skulu byggja, and throughout life days, och aldar daga, enjoy pleasure, njóta yndis. I would pointing out that they will enjoy pleasure throughout their life days implies that there is still death after Ragnarok as well. And, of course, in the final haunting stanza of Våluspá, we have the ultimate indication that not all will be well, that this is not a paradise, this is just a renewal of the constant conflict between good and evil, even after Ragnarok has killed off all of the old gods and giants. Þar kumur in dimi dreki fljúgandi, naðar frá neðan frá nýðafjólum. Berser í fjóðrum flygur vol yfir, nýðhógur nói, nú mun hon sökkvask. So since this is one of the 9 stanzas, this poem is composed in multiple of 9, I'll read this word by word, in addition to giving you a more fluid translation. There comes the dim, dark dragon flying, serpent glistening, naðar frón, down from Nýðafjólum, dark mountains. Bears in its own sere in feathers. Sere is dative because, of course, the feathers are a body part of this flying serpent, so sere indicates that it's its own feathers, so it bears in its feathers, í fjórðum sere. Flies over the valley, flýgur yfir vol, nýðhógur, and then we have what it bears in its feathers, which is nói, again accused of plural of nor, corpses. Now will she sink. So there comes the dark dragon flying, the glistening serpent down from Nýðafjól, the dark mountains. It bears corpses in its wings. Nýðhógur bears corpses in its wings and its feathers. It flies over the valley. Now she, that is the Volva who has been speaking this poem, will sink. Hi, I'm Old Norse specialist Dr. Jackson Crawford. Recently, I've completed a read-through of Våluspá in Old Norse, explaining each stanza as I go, but I based that read-through on the manuscript called the Codex Regius, or Hauksbók, which is older than another manuscript that contains a version of Våluspá. Now this manuscript is Hauksbók in Old Norse, Hauksbók in modern Icelandic, named for its patron and one of its scribes, a man named Helgr Erlendsson, who died in 1334. Hauksbók was probably composed in the first decade of the 1300s. Now, the version of Våluspá in Hauksbók is actually shorter than the version in the Codex Regius. It leaves out particularly the big middle part between the creation and Ragnarok, where the Volva turns to Odin, says, I know where you hid your eye, I know how Baldr died, I know the names of the Valkyries, that sort of thing. That's not there in the Hauksbók version. But it does include some stanzas that are not in the Codex Regius, and so in this video I'm going to talk about those. So after the stanza where she mentions Heimdallr hiding his hljóð, probably his hearing or ear, and the muddy water where Odin hid his ved, his pledge, his eye, she skips, as I said, right over all the part where she talks about she knows where that eye is and about the death of Baldr, and we get this stanza. Þók nó valla, vígbón snúa, heldur voru harðgjör hopt or þormum. Þar situr Sigun, þauki sínum ver vel glíuð, vitu þeir enn eða what? And it's actually a little bit difficult to figure out what's going on here. So vígbond is presumably the subject. This could be war or battle chains, bond, but that chains word is often used to mean gods, as I've mentioned, for example, in my video about Norse worship. So this could actually be the gods. So then the gods, and then knå, this is a filler word, as I've also discussed in previous videos about Våluspá. But it's not in the form we'd expect if bond, plural, is the subject, knå is the first or third person singular form. We'd expect knegu, but you do occasionally see knå in the plural in later texts. So I'm just gonna take that as a filler word with vígbond, and then the verb snúa is to change. Its basic meaning is to turn, but here the meaning seems to be change. So then the gods change Voli. Now this is not the Voli who avenges Baldr. This is Voli, one of the names of one of Loki's children. The chains, hoft, were rather hard made, helder hardgjör, out of intestines, or thormum. And this matches the story Snorri tells us that one of Loki's sons was turned into a wolf to punish him, and then the intestines of that son or another son were used to chain Loki up. But Våluspá in Hauksbók does not clarify what Loki's being punished for. But then we also have this half a stanza that is in the Codex Regius, although in a different context. There, Sigyn sits, though she's not well cheered about her husband, do you know yet, or what? And then there is another stanza that seems perhaps only half complete in the Codex Regius, but that is whole in Hauksbók, although it has the first two couplets reversed. Skelver Yggdrasils asker standandi umr it aldna trä en jotun losnar. Ræðask allir og helvegum óður sortar þann sevi of gloipir. Now that first half, like I said, is in the Codex Regius, although without the second half, and that first half has the order of the couplets reversed. So here we have Yggdrasil's ask shakes standing, the old tree groans, and the giant is freed. Then we get new stuff. All, probably all men, this is masculine nominative plural, are afraid on hell roads, helvegum. Before Surtur's kinsman, Surtar Sevi, that's a kenning for fire, Gloiper swallows Than, him or it. Than is masculine accused of singular. Presumably this refers back to Askr, which is masculine, the ash tree. So before Surtur's fire consumes Yggdrasil, everyone on the hell roads, everyone who is dead or dying perhaps, everyone who is mortal by extension, will be terrified. Another stanza unique to the Hauksbók version is between Vidar's fight with Fenrir and Thor's fight with Jormungandr. We get this extra stanza. Gín loft yfir lindi jarðar gapa yx kjaftar orms í hæðum. Mun Óðinsson ormi möta vargs at dauða Vidars niðja. All right, Lindi Jarðar, belt of the earth, that means Jormungandr, the Midgard serpent. Yawns or gapes, gin, over the sky, yfir loft, because it's so huge. The terrifying serpents, yx orms, jaws, kjaftar, gape in the heights. Odin's son will meet the worm, mun möta ormi, at the monster's death, at dauðavargs, at, I think probably this is genitive singular again, at the death of, being taken from the previous line, at the death of Vidar's kinsman, which could be any number of these gods who are dying left and right at Ragnarok. The last word in the seventh line is actually not clear. If you look at the manuscript, I mean, I obviously don't have Hauksbók in one of my pockets here or something, but you can get good facsimiles of most of these manuscripts online now, and there is one of Hauksbók on hanrit.is, so I went looking at it directly to see what I thought. It's impossible to even read this stanza. It's so darkened by now. But people are not 100% clear of the word. The last word in the seventh line is dauða, because the bottom of page 20v of this manuscript is so hard to read. But apparently earlier readers in the 1600s, 1700s could identify at least the letters DA. And then famously, Hauksbók has a second to last stanza between the stanza about Gimle, the hall where humans are going to live after Ragnarok, and the stanza about Nidhogr, the evil dragon that's going to survive Ragnarok. We get this stanza. Þó kemur hinn ríki at regindomi, oflugur ofan sá Olu ræður. Then comes the mighty to God judgment, or mighty judgment, or simply goddom, deity. A mighty one, oflugur, from above, that one who rules all. Now, this has typically been taken as a reference to Jesus Christ that has been sandwiched in here. After Ragnarok, the death of the old gods, Jesus, who rules all, a mighty one from above, is going to come down and become, well, enter into his goddom, his regendomer. I don't know. I definitely think that this is not part of the original composition of Våluspá. I do think that if there's any stanza that is likely to be late, it is that one. And I think it's interesting if you look at the context of Hauksbók right around Våluspá. Right before it is something called Avsaknir fyrir samnøyti við bansetta. Excuses for interacting with the excommunicated. It's some church law about, for example, you know, if your spouse is excommunicated, to what extent can you communicate with them, that sort of thing. Which is interesting, because obviously this is being jammed into a pretty explicitly Christian context, and, you know, one might think about excommunication in relation to an interest in pagan things. And right after Våluspá and Hauksbók is Trojumanna saga, which is the Old Norse medieval version of the fall of Troy. It's actually kind of an interesting thing to read in and of itself. But the whole context of the manuscript is just sort of old lore, whether Christian or classical or medieval Norse, all kind of jammed together. And it's instructive to remember that probably Haukr's interest in this was antiquarian and might have even connected to the basically BS notion that Snorri also comes up with in the beginning of his prose edda, that the Norse gods are somehow the Trojans. That may be why Våluspá is placed right there before Trojumanna saga, which tells about the fall of Troy. But I think it's important to remember, again, you know, unlike in the Codex Regius, where you have all these poems about the pagan gods together, and that is the context here is someone who's just interested in antiquity, might not be above copying some stanzas that might not be as genuine, might be a little bit later. I'm not saying that Haukr actually composed that stanza or any of the others. There's some complications in them that suggest that, you know, this probably isn't the work of just whoever wrote this, but that in the meantime, somewhere in the decades between, or more than a century between the exemplar of the Codex Regius being composed and the Hauksbók being composed, that other people might have worked on Våluspá. There might have been other stanzas that had been added in the meantime by other people. It's also possible that for centuries there had been multiple different versions of Våluspá, right? I mean, even Snorri, when he quotes Våluspá, doesn't always quote the words exactly like in either of the other manuscripts. You know, sometimes we actually find sagas in very short versions and also in long versions. Interestingly, Hauksbók is often one where we find shorter versions, like of Erik Saga Rauða. You know, and that's not so unfamiliar to us today. Something like American Pie exists in a radio edit and in, you know, a long self-indulgent version. Something like Våluspá could have two, and there's nothing to say that Våluspá necessarily had to have been composed by one person in, say, the late 900s and then remained unchanged, you know, forever. I think even the Koningsbook version probably isn't exactly a transcript of whatever the quote-unquote original composer had intended. But it's all an interesting look at how Norse poetry, poetry of any culture that's more or less oral-based, comes together. And I hope that you've enjoyed these reviews of both Våluspá and the Codex Regius and in Hauksbók. And I hope that you'll check out my translation of Våluspá in my translation of the Poetic Edda, as well as my Patreon, which helps me continue to make these videos for free to help inform the internet from beautiful places in my Rocky Mountain homeland of Wyoming and Colorado. For now, from beautiful Colorado, as the sun rises in the Front Range, I'm wishing you all the best.